What would you do if your husband handed you legal documents the morning after you stayed out all night with another man? Can a marriage survive when one partner crosses a line and the other fights back, not with anger, but with cold, careful evidence? This is the story of how my night of freedom led to the day everything changed forever. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The morning sun streamed through our kitchen window as I stumbled through the front door, my heels in my hand and my hair disheveled. Henry sat at the breakfast table, still in his pajamas, holding my phone. His face was stone cold as he looked up at me. "Good morning, Desdemona," he said quietly. "Elliot says he had a great time last night and can't wait to see you again." My heart dropped into my stomach. This wasn't how I'd planned to handle things. The previous evening had started innocently enough. At least, that's what I told myself as I applied fresh lipstick in the bathroom mirror at Meridian Bar downtown. The trendy spot was packed with young professionals, and I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. "Another round?" Elliot Warren asked, sliding up beside me at the bar. At 29, he was 3 years younger than me, with the kind of easy charm that made my boring suburban life feel like a prison sentence. "I should probably head home," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "Henry's expecting me." Elliot laughed, his hand brushing mine as he reached for his drink. "Come on, Des. When's the last time you did something just for you? Live a little." My phone buzzed with another text from Henry. "Maya's asking where you are. When will you be home?" I turned the phone face down on the bar. One more drink. That one drink turned into 3. Then, Elliot suggested we go to his apartment just a few blocks away to continue the conversation somewhere quieter. I knew exactly what that meant, and for the first time in years, I felt wanted, desired, free from the mundane routine of marriage and motherhood. "Your husband seems pretty worried," Elliot said around midnight, nodding at my phone as it lit up with another call from Henry. "He's always worried about something," I replied, declining the call. "He doesn't understand that I need space to breathe." What followed was a night of passion and excitement that I'd been craving for months. Elliot made me feel young again, spontaneous, like the woman I used to be before I became just Henry's wife and Maya's mom. As dawn approached, reality began to creep back in. I gathered my clothes from Elliot's bedroom floor while he slept peacefully, his arm draped across the pillow where my head had been just hours before. "This was fun," he murmured as I kissed him goodbye. "Text me later." The drive home felt like a death march. I rehearsed my story. Work drinks had run late. I'd crashed at my colleague Sarah's place because I'd had too much to drink to drive safely. It was responsible, really. Henry would understand, but as I pulled into our driveway, I saw the living room lights were still on. Henry never stayed up this late. My stomach twisted with a mixture of guilt and annoyance. Why couldn't he just trust me? I crept through the front door, hoping to slip upstairs unnoticed, but there he was in the kitchen, fully dressed despite the early hour, my phone in his hands. "Desdemona?" His voice was eerily calm. "We need to talk." "Where have you been?" Henry asked, setting my phone on the counter between us like evidence in a trial. "I told you, work drinks ran late," I said, trying to inject confidence into my voice. "Sarah and I ended up talking until really late, so I crashed at her place. I didn't want to drive after drinking." Henry nodded slowly. "That's interesting, because Elliot Warren sent you a message at 2:17 a.m. saying he had an amazing time and can't wait to do it again." My blood ran cold, but I forced myself to look confused. "Who's Elliot Warren? I don't know anyone by that name." "The bartender at Meridian, the one whose number is now in your phone under EW." Henry's voice remained steady, but I could see the hurt flickering in his eyes. "Henry, you're being paranoid again," I said, moving toward the coffee maker to avoid his gaze. "Maybe someone sent a message to the wrong number." It happens all the time. So, you're saying you don't know him? I might have talked to the bartender when I ordered drinks. That's what bartenders do, Henry. They talk to customers. It doesn't mean anything. I could see him processing this, wanting to believe me despite the evidence. This was always Henry's weakness. He wanted to see the best in people, especially in me. Then why didn't you answer any of my calls or texts? He asked. Because I was having a conversation with Sarah about her divorce, and it was important. I can't be checking my phone every 5 minutes like some teenager. From upstairs, we heard Maya's bedroom door creak open. Our 7-year-old daughter appeared at the top of the stairs in her pink pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, why are you yelling?" "We're not yelling, sweetheart," I called up to her. "Daddy and I are just talking. Go back to bed." But Maya's presence had shifted something in Henry's demeanor. He looked at our daughter, then back at me, and I saw a new hardness in his expression. "We'll continue this later," he said quietly, then walked upstairs to tuck Maya back into bed. I stood alone in the kitchen, my heart pounding. This was Henry's fault, really. If he paid more attention to me, if he made me feel desired and appreciated, I wouldn't have needed to seek that elsewhere. He was always so focused on work, on Maya, on his mother's opinions. When was the last time he'd looked at me the way Elliot had last night? My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Carla. "How was your night of freedom? Details, please." I quickly deleted the message and headed upstairs. Henry was coming out of Maya's room, and we passed in the hallway without speaking. But I caught him taking a photo of something with his phone. My purse, which I'd left on the hall table. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Nothing," he said, but his tone suggested otherwise. As I got ready for bed, I told myself that this would all blow over. Henry was suspicious by nature, but he had no real proof of anything. I'd been careful, or at least careful enough. But as I lay in bed next to my husband's rigid form, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us. And for the first time since my night with Elliot, I wondered if the price of my freedom might be higher than I'd anticipated. 2 weeks later, Henry's mother Linda was hosting her annual family barbecue. I'd been dreading it since the calendar reminder popped up on my phone that morning. Linda had never particularly liked me, and I suspected Henry had told her about his suspicions regarding my night out. "Do we have to go?" I asked Henry as he loaded potato salad into the car. "It's important to Mom," he said without looking at me. "And Maya loves seeing her cousins." The drive to Linda's house was tense and silent. Maya chattered from the back seat about wanting to swim in Grandma's pool, but Henry and I barely acknowledged each other. Linda's house was already full of relatives when we arrived. Henry's brother Brian was manning the grill while his wife corralled their twin boys. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins milled around the backyard, drinks in hand. "Desdemona," Linda approached with what I recognized as her fake smile. "How lovely that you could make it. Henry wasn't sure you'd be able to get away from work." The way she said work made it clear she knew something. I forced a smile in return. "I wouldn't miss it, Linda. You know how much I love family gatherings." As the afternoon wore on, I found myself growing increasingly frustrated with Henry's cold treatment. He spoke to everyone else normally, laughed with his cousins, helped with the food, but barely acknowledged my presence. It was embarrassing, and I could feel the family starting to notice. That's when Elliot showed up. "Hey everyone," called Brian's wife Jessica from the back gate. "Look who I ran into at the grocery store. This is Elliot. He works at that new bar downtown." My heart stopped as Elliot Warren walked into the backyard, casual as could be in jeans and a polo shirt. His eyes found mine immediately, and he had the audacity to wink. "Small world," he said, making his way over to where I stood frozen by the beverage table. "Elliot, right?" Henry appeared beside me so suddenly I jumped. "I think we've met before. Indirectly." "Have we?" Elliot's smile was easy, confident. "I don't think I remember." "Oh, I'm sure you do," Henry said quietly. You sent my wife a very memorable text a couple weeks ago. The conversation around us seemed to fade as the three of us stood in an uncomfortable triangle. I could feel Linda watching from across the yard. I think there might be some confusion, I said quickly. Elliot, this is my husband, Henry. Henry, Elliot is just... The bartender who's been texting my wife, Henry finished. Elliot's expression shifted slightly, but he recovered quickly. Hey man, I text lots of customers about events and specials. It's just business. At 2 a.m., Henry asked. Henry, please, I said, grabbing his arm. You're making a scene. But instead of backing down, something reckless rose up in me. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe I was just tired of feeling guilty and defensive. I turned to Elliot with what I hoped was a casual smile. How's the new cocktail menu coming along? I asked. I've been meaning to stop by and try those craft margaritas you mentioned. You should definitely come in, Elliot replied, either oblivious to the tension or enjoying it. I'll make you something special. Henry's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Around us, I could feel the family's attention focusing on our little drama. Well, I said loudly enough for others to hear, it's nice to have options. Sometimes a girl needs to get out and remind herself she's more than just a housewife. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Linda's face went white, Brian stopped flipping burgers, and several conversations died mid-sentence. Henry looked at me for a long moment, then simply walked away toward the house. Awkward, Elliot murmured beside me. For the rest of the afternoon, I felt like I was performing in a play where everyone else knew the script except me. Henry's relatives were polite but distant. Linda barely spoke to me. Even Maya seemed to sense something was wrong and stayed close to her father. As we were getting ready to leave, Linda cornered Henry by the front door while I was gathering Maya's pool toys. I have some concerns, I heard her say in a low voice, about Desdemona's behavior, about that young man. I know, Mom, Henry replied quietly. I have dashcam footage from 2 weeks ago, Linda continued, from when I drove past downtown around 3 a.m., coming back from the hospital after visiting Aunt Ruth. I saw her car parked outside an apartment building. I have the address and the timestamp. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't known Linda was downtown that night, hadn't seen her car. Can you send me that footage? Henry asked. Already copied to a flash drive, Linda replied. I wasn't sure if I should give it to you, but after today, after seeing that boy here... Thank you, Henry said simply. As we drove home in silence, I realized that my attempt to assert my independence at the barbecue had backfired spectacularly. Instead of making Henry look jealous and controlling, I'd managed to make myself look guilty and reckless in front of his entire family. But it was too late to take any of it back now. Monday morning at work felt like stepping into a minefield. I'd spent the weekend trying to convince Henry that the barbecue incident was just me being social, that he was reading too much into innocent interactions. But his responses had been minimal, and I could tell he was planning something. Des, can I talk to you? My coworker, Sarah Martinez, approached my desk with an uncomfortable expression. My stomach dropped. Sarah was the woman I'd claimed to stay with the night I was actually at Elliot's apartment. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual. What's up? Your husband called me this weekend, she said quietly. He was asking about the night 2 weeks ago, when you supposedly stayed at my place after work drinks. I felt the blood drain from my face. What did you tell him? The truth, Sarah said firmly. That we didn't go out for drinks that night, and you definitely didn't stay at my place. Des, what's going on? Why would you lie about something like that? It's complicated, I said, looking around to make sure no one else was listening. Henry's been really controlling lately, questioning everything I do. I just needed some space. Sarah's expression softened slightly, but she still looked troubled. Look, I get that marriage can be tough, but I'm not comfortable being dragged into whatever this is. If anyone else asks, I'm going to tell the truth. After Sarah walked away, I felt panic rising in my chest. My alibi was falling apart, and I needed to do something to regain control of the situation. That afternoon, I found myself confiding in my colleague, Janet, from HR during our lunch break. "I think my husband might be stalking me," I said, testing the words to see how they sounded. "He's been checking my phone, questioning my whereabouts, even calling my friends to verify my stories." Janet frowned. "That does sound concerning. Have you considered couples counseling?" "I've suggested it, but he refuses," I lied smoothly. "He says I'm the one with the problem, that I'm being unfaithful, but I'm not. I just want to be able to have a social life without being interrogated." "Well, if you ever feel unsafe or need resources, you know HR is here to help," Janet said supportively. I felt a small surge of satisfaction. If Henry wanted to play detective, I could play the victim just as well. But my confidence was short-lived. Tuesday morning, I found an email from Henry waiting in my inbox with the subject line, "For your records." The email contained a single PDF attachment, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Something about Henry's tone lately, the way he'd been quietly observing everything, made me nervous about what he might have compiled. Instead, I forwarded the email to my sister Carla with a message. "Henry's being weird again. Can you look at this and tell me if it's anything important?" Carla called me within an hour. "Des, you need to see this," she said, her voice tight with concern. "It's a timeline. Of everything. Your phone records, bank statements showing charges at that bar, even photos of your car parked outside some apartment building." My hand started shaking. "Photos? How does he have photos? It looks like dashcam footage from someone else's car. And there's more. He has text messages between you and this Elliot guy that you apparently thought you deleted." I sank into my desk chair, feeling like the walls were closing in around me. "What should I do?" I whispered into the phone. "Get a lawyer," Carla said immediately. "This looks like he's building a case for something. Maybe divorce, maybe worse. You need to protect yourself." But even as Carla spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. Henry had been 3 steps ahead of me this entire time, quietly gathering evidence while I'd been focused on covering my tracks and managing the narrative. That evening, I tried one more time to salvage the situation. I waited until Maya was asleep, then approached Henry in his home office, where he was working on his laptop. "We need to talk," I said, sitting down across from his desk. Henry looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, not angry, not hurt, but completely detached. "About what?" he asked calmly. "About us. About this distance between us. I know things have been difficult lately, but we can work through this." "Can we?" Henry asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've already made your choice." "That's not true," I said, tears starting to form in my eyes. "I made a mistake, okay? I admit it, but it didn't mean anything. It was just, I was feeling neglected, unappreciated. I needed to feel wanted again." Henry nodded slowly. "So this is my fault." "That's not what I'm saying," I backtracked quickly. "I'm saying we both contributed to the problems in our marriage, but we can fix this if we both try." "I see," Henry said. "And what about Elliot? Are you still in contact with him?" I hesitated for just a moment too long. "No, of course not. That's over." Henry's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes that made me realize he knew I was lying. "I'm taking steps to protect myself and Maya," he said quietly. "I thought you should know." "What kind of steps?" I asked, but Henry had already turned back to his laptop. "We'll discuss it soon," he said. "Very soon." The next few days passed in a strange, tense calm. Henry went to work, came home, helped Maya with her homework, and went to bed. He was polite but distant, treating me like a roommate rather than his wife. I kept expecting another confrontation, but it never came. Maya seemed to sense the tension between us. She'd started drawing pictures at school of our family, but in every drawing, her parents were on opposite sides of the page with her in the middle. "Mummy, are you and Daddy fighting?" she asked me Thursday evening as I tucked her into bed. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements," I said carefully, but we both love you very much, and that will never change. Tommy's parents got divorced, Maya said quietly. He has to live in 2 different houses now. My heart clenched. Don't worry about that, sweetheart. Daddy and I are working things out. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them. Friday evening, I decided to make one last effort to save my marriage. I cooked Henry's favorite dinner, opened a bottle of wine, and waited for him to come home from work. This is nice, he said, when he saw the table set with candles and our good china, but his tone was cautious rather than appreciative. I wanted to do something special, I said, to show you how much you mean to me. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about Maya's upcoming school play and Henry's work projects. It felt like we were both performing normalcy rather than actually experiencing it. After Maya went to bed, I poured Henry another glass of wine and sat down beside him on the couch. I know I've hurt you, I said, taking his hand. I know I've made mistakes, but I want to fight for us, Henry. I want to fight for our family. Henry looked down at our joined hands. What exactly are you willing to fight for, Desdemona? Our marriage, our future together. I'll do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust. Even if it means cutting off all contact with Elliot? I hesitated. Elliot had been texting me sporadically over the past week, and I'd been responding. Nothing explicit, just casual conversation, but I could see how Henry might view it as a betrayal. Yes, I said finally, if that's what you need. And you'll be completely honest with me going forward. No more lies, no more stories that don't add up. Yes, I said again, though something in his tone made me nervous. Henry nodded slowly. I appreciate you saying that, but Desdemona, I need you to understand something. Trust isn't just rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt with consistent actions over time. And right now, I'm not sure we have that time. What do you mean? I mean, I'm taking steps to protect myself and Maya. I've consulted with an attorney. I've documented everything that's happened over the past few weeks, and I'm prepared to move forward with or without your cooperation. I felt like I'd been slapped. You're threatening me. I'm not threatening you, Henry said calmly. I'm telling you the reality of our situation. You made choices that have consequences. I'm simply responding to those choices in a way that protects my interests and Maya's interests. But I just told you I want to work things out. And I heard you, but wanting to work things out now, after you've been caught, isn't the same as being trustworthy. It's damage control. I stared at him, seeing clearly for the first time how completely I'd underestimated my husband. He wasn't the passive, trusting man I'd married. He'd been quietly building a case against me, while I'd been focused on managing the immediate crisis. So, what happens now? I asked. Now we see how committed you really are to change, Henry said. Starting tomorrow. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Henry slept peacefully beside me. I'd always thought of myself as the stronger personality in our marriage, the one who made things happen while Henry went along with my plans. But I was beginning to realize that Henry's quiet nature had hidden a steel core I'd never recognized. Saturday morning, I was awakened by the doorbell. Henry was already up and dressed, which was unusual for a weekend. I'll get it, he said when I started to get out of bed. I heard voices at the front door, Henry's and a woman's I didn't recognize, then footsteps coming up the stairs. Desdemona Vale, a middle-aged woman in a business suit, appeared in our bedroom doorway, holding an official-looking envelope. Yes, I said, pulling my robe tighter around me. You've been served, she said, handing me the envelope. Have a good day. I stared at the envelope in my hands, my heart pounding. Behind the process server, Henry appeared in the doorway, fully dressed and holding Maya's overnight bag. Maya's spending the weekend at my mother's, he said calmly. I suggest you read those documents carefully. We'll talk when I get back. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with a legal envelope that I was terrified to open. The law office of Peterson and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of a downtown high-rise. I sat in the waiting area Monday morning, my hands shaking as I clutched the legal documents that had turned my world upside down. Petition for legal separation, request for temporary custody, motion to freeze joint assets. The words had blurred together when I first read them Saturday afternoon, but their meaning was crystal clear. Henry wasn't just threatening to leave me, he was systematically dismantling our shared life. Mrs. Vale, a receptionist appeared beside me. Mr. Peterson will see you now. I followed her down a hallway, lined with law books and framed degrees, into a conference room where Henry sat beside a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. Desdemona, Henry said, standing as I entered. This is my attorney, James Peterson. Peterson shook my hand with the practiced grip of someone who'd handled thousands of divorces. Please, have a seat. I understand you don't have legal representation yet? No, I haven't had time to find anyone, I said, looking between the two men. Henry, can we please talk about this privately? I think it's better if we handle this formally, Henry replied, to avoid any misunderstandings. Peterson opened a thick folder and spread documents across the conference table. Mrs. Vale, my client has presented compelling evidence of marital misconduct that forms the basis for this separation petition. Marital misconduct, I repeated. That's a very dramatic way to describe a few text messages. I'm afraid it's more than text messages, Peterson said, sliding a photograph across the table. This is dashcam footage showing your vehicle parked outside Mr. Warren's apartment building from 11:47 p.m. on March 15th until 5:23 a.m. on March 16th. My stomach dropped as I stared at the timestamp on the photo. We also have phone records showing deleted text messages that were recovered from your device, Peterson continued. Bank records showing charges at Meridian Bar during hours when you claimed to be working late, and witness statements from your co-workers contradicting your alibi for that evening. He spread more documents across the table like a dealer laying out cards. Each piece of evidence felt like a nail in the coffin of my marriage. Henry, I said, turning to my husband desperately, this is crazy. We can work through this without lawyers and legal documents. Can we? Henry asked. Because when I gave you the chance to be honest with me, you continued lying. When I asked you to cut contact with Elliot, you kept texting him. When I tried to salvage our marriage, you humiliated me in front of my family. I was confused, I said, tears starting to flow. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle the situation. So you decided to handle it by gaslighting me, Henry said, his voice harder than I'd ever heard it. By telling me I was paranoid and controlling when I was simply asking for the truth. Peterson cleared his throat. Mrs. Vale, my client is prepared to offer you a fair settlement. You can remain in the family home for 60 days while you find alternative housing. You'll have supervised visitation with Maya every other weekend. Joint assets will be divided according to Illinois law, minus legal fees and the cost of the private investigator. Private investigator? I gasped. Mr. Warren was very cooperative once he understood the legal implications of his involvement with a married woman, Peterson said dryly, particularly when it came to providing screenshots of your communications. I felt the room spinning around me. Elliot talked to you. He provided a sworn statement detailing your relationship, Henry said, including the fact that you told him I was emotionally abusive and that you were planning to leave me anyway. I never said that, I protested, though even as the words left my mouth, I remembered complaining to Elliot about Henry during one of our text conversations. Mrs. Vale, Peterson said gently, I've been practicing family law for 30 years. I've seen cases like this before. Your best option is to accept the terms my client is offering and move forward with your life. And if I don't? I asked. Peterson exchanged a glance with Henry. Then we proceed to a contested divorce, where all of this evidence becomes part of the public record. Your employer will likely be subpoenaed regarding your false statements about working late. Mr. Warren may be called to testify about the nature of your relationship. Your daughter will potentially be interviewed by a court-appointed guardian. The thought of Maya being dragged through a public divorce trial made me feel sick. "I need time to think," I said weakly. "Of course," Peterson said, "but I should mention that the temporary custody order goes into effect immediately. Maya will remain with her father pending the outcome of these proceedings." I looked at Henry, really looked at him, for the first time in months. The man sitting across from me bore little resemblance to the patient, forgiving husband I'd taken for granted. His eyes were cold, his posture confident, his voice steady as he destroyed the life we'd built together. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. "Since the morning you came home from Elliot's apartment," Henry said. "I gave you multiple opportunities to tell me the truth. You chose deception every time." "I was protecting our marriage," I said desperately. "No," Henry said firmly. "You were protecting yourself. There's a difference." Peterson began gathering the documents. "Mrs. Vale, you have 72 hours to respond to the separation petition. I'd strongly recommend you retain counsel." As we stood to leave, I made one final attempt to reach the man I'd married. "Henry, please, think about Maya. Think about our family. Don't destroy everything we've built over one mistake." Henry paused at the conference room door. "Desdemona, you didn't make one mistake. You made a series of choices over several weeks, each one designed to deceive and manipulate me. Even now, you're not taking responsibility for what you've done. You're trying to make me the villain for refusing to be a victim." "But I love you," I whispered. "Maybe you do," Henry said, "but love without respect, without honesty, without commitment, isn't enough to build a marriage on." He walked out of the conference room, leaving me alone with Peterson, who was packing his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd handled this conversation countless times before. "Mrs. Vale," he said kindly, "my advice is to find a good attorney and work toward an amicable resolution. Fighting this will only make things more expensive and more painful for everyone involved, especially your daughter." I stumbled out of the law office into the bright afternoon sunshine, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My phone buzzed with a text from Carla. "How did it go?" But I couldn't even begin to explain how thoroughly my life had just imploded. Instead, I sat in my car in the parking garage and cried until I had no tears left. When I finally drove home to our empty house, I found a note from Henry on the kitchen counter. "Maya's school things are packed. She'll be staying with me at my mother's house until further notice. Please don't contact her directly. All communication should go through our attorneys." I walked through the house we'd shared for 8 years, seeing it now through Henry's eyes. The family photos on the mantel, Maya's artwork on the refrigerator, the coffee mug Henry had given me for our last anniversary still sitting in the sink. I'd thrown it all away for a few nights of excitement with a man who'd sold me out the moment things got complicated. My phone rang. It was my mother. "Desdemona, Carla told me what happened. Honey, are you okay?" "No, Mom," I said, sinking onto the couch. "I'm not okay. I think I've lost everything." "Well," my mother said after a long pause, "maybe it's time to figure out how to get it back." But as I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, I realized that some things, once broken, can never be repaired. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I understood that Henry wasn't coming back. 3 months later, I signed the final divorce papers in the same conference room where my marriage had officially ended. Henry got primary custody of Maya, the house, and most of our assets. I got a studio apartment across town and every other weekend with my daughter. As I walked out of Peterson and Associates for the last time, I saw Henry in the lobby with Maya, who was wearing a new dress I didn't recognize. They were talking quietly about her upcoming birthday party, making plans for a life that no longer included me as anything more than a footnote. Henry looked up as I passed, and for just a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd married. But then Maya tugged on his hand, and he turned his attention back to our daughter, walking out of the building without another glance in my direction. I stood on the sidewalk watching them drive away, understanding finally that this was the price of my choices. Henry hadn't destroyed our family in a fit of rage or jealousy. He'd simply refused to participate in my version of marriage, where his feelings and our daughter's stability were secondary to my need for excitement and validation. And now, as I walked to my car alone, I realized that the man I'd underestimated had taught me the most expensive lesson of my life. Actions have consequences, and some consequences last forever.